print a multi-dimensional array. In my last video, if you see my last video, I created a multi-dimensional array, and also we printed some variable, like one variable at a time based on the location they are in. Here what we are going to do is we are going to create a code that's going to actually print out the entire multi-dimensional array. Now let's go ahead and create the multi-dimensional array first. So here I'm going to name the array Sally, integer Sally, and I put a square bracket, and the first square represents the row and the second square represents the column. You have to treat the multi-dimensional array like a row and a column in a table. Like if you're familiar with Excel, you know that row and column, that's the one we are talking about. So first one represents a row and the second one represents the column. So here I'm gonna have two number of column and then 3 number of rows. Okay, 3 number of rows, and we created 2 arrays, and then now we are going to assign some variables for arrays. In order to do that, I put equal and then curly bracket. Inside of the first curly bracket, I'm gonna write some numbers like 2, 3, and then 4, and I close this curly bracket and put a comma, and after that I'm gonna put another curly bracket, and here I'm gonna assign some numbers like 8, 9, and then 7. Okay, so now we have assigned some elements for our arrays. Once we have done that, we can now let's see how are we going to print this one out. So here what we have to do is since we have like for small numbers we can do manually as well, but it's better to use a for loop, because if you have big numbers, the for loops always helps. So that's why I'm going to do this printing with a for loop, and here if you pick up the pattern in the for loop, you can do with the big numbers. Now let's go ahead and create the for loop. So for the first for loop, I'm going to create for the rows. So let's go ahead and create that. And for the arrays, we know that index is always starting with 0, so we assign integer row is equal to 0. That's our first value. And the next one is row is less than 2, because we have the number of rows we have is 2 and it's starting from 0, so 0, 1 is already 2, so that's why we put row is less than 2, and then we do the increment by 1, row plus plus. Okay, this is our first for loop for the rows, and then we are going to create a nested for loop for columns. So inside this for loop we create another for loop that's for the columns. So for, and columns also same like that, similar to this, and we know that for a for an array the index is always starting from 0, so we put integer column, the first number is equal to 0, and then like the top one, we know that if there's 2 number of rows, we put less than 2. Here we have 3 number of columns, so we put less than 3 because it's counting from 0, so 0, 1, 2, that's already three elements. Column is less than 3, and then we do the increment by 1, column plus plus. So now we have a for loop that goes through all the elements in our array. Now we have to print it out on the screen. To print it out on the screen, I'm going to put a printout statement, and outside of this last curly bracket, I'm going to put a cout end line. Make sure you're putting it outside of the curly bracket. So cout end line to finish the code, but on top of that we are going to write the code to actually print every element. So to print every element, what I'm going to write is cout, and then we are going to create a code that will run through all the columns and rows. So here I put a multi-dimensional array, row and the column. So each time this for loop run, this row and column will be replaced with every number. Like if you're starting from 0, the first time row is going to replace with 0, and the column also, here I put the column also going to be replaced with 0. Then it changes according to the for loop run. And that's how we are going to print out all the numbers. Now let's go ahead and see how you're going to get it. And here I'm going to leave some space for gap in between the elements. So I put the quad and leave some space, and that's it. Now our code is done. Let's go ahead and run this one and see if it works. Build and run. Okay, now you can see we are getting exactly the same elements we assigned. 2, 3, 4, that's our first 3 elements, and 8, 9, 7, that's our second 3 elements. And this is the best visual representation of multidimensional array. This is how their location represents. And that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the next video.